Hello, everyone. It's Clair Maxwell coming to you from the host city of this year's convention in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here to give you a brief version of my presentation of the triple threat organist, how to be player, conductor, and accompanist all at the same time. First thing that I have found that works well is to choose your music wisely. Music that has a lot of tempo changes, lots of syncopation, difficult rhythms for the choir, and also more extensive works with more complicated organ accompaniment tend to not work quite as well for the typical parish choir who's trying to sing along with music that you have rehearsed them in, but are now playing for them and really accompanying with them in the worship service. So choose your music wisely. There's plenty of good music that has simple accompaniment and straightforward rhythm patterns that has the same time signature all the way through the piece. Those kinds of things will help make your job a lot easier. The second thing I've found to be helpful is to study the score. For certain, we do this on a weekly basis anyway, and a lot of us have experience with these pieces for years and years in our musical life. But don't forget to study the score also from the singer's perspective, in particular if they've never heard it before, or it might be a new piece to them, or something that might be inherently sort of difficult or awkward that we may be used to, but that the singers might not. So after you've chosen your music wisely and you've studied the score all the way through from their perspective, beginnings and endings and sections and dynamics, all of that stuff that we want to still be included in our final result, even though we are both player and conductor. We want to practice the accompaniment. And of course, again, this goes without saying, we wouldn't go into any public worship or concert performance having not practiced and being a sight reader at the keyboard. But as you practice the accompaniment, not just the notes and the organ part, but include in your practice the cues that you intend to give the choir. And everybody has their own method that works for them. Some of us rearrange the notes on the keyboard from a two-hand arrangement to a one-hand arrangement and free up our other hand to be able to give traditional choir cues with that hand. That does involve some arranging and making sure that the notes of the chord and the harmony are all encompassed in one hand, even if they're not the original notes that are in the score. You want the chords to be represented in that case, even if all the actual notes are not strictly adhered to. But some of us like to use a combination of head bobs or looks or other things that we work out with the choir ahead of time. It's kind of like our secret code between the organist director and the choir, so that they know what to look for, and it's something that we can do in an obvious fashion without losing our place or losing track of what we're doing. Sometimes a very energetic head bob can cause us to lose our place in the music, for instance, and we don't want that to happen. So whatever works for you, practice that with yourself first as you practice the accompaniment, and then teach it to the choir so that they know what to expect and practice it with them. Speaking of the choir, once they're involved at this point, after we're ready to go, make sure to teach the choir with minimal keyboard. This is a good practice anyway for good choral singing, but a lot of us tend to wonder what happens when week after week we've been pounding out their parts as they play, as they sing and we play the piano, and then all of a sudden the week of the anthem we expect them to know what they're doing without having their notes played for them. And in this case in particular, it's important for us to teach with minimal keyboard, because the less they are dependent on their notes being played for them, especially if those notes are not played in the actual piece, then the more successful they will be anyway. But again, especially in this case when they don't have a conductor to rely upon in that situation, they'll be more confident in their part and be able to sing it more accurately. Teach it also, I found, at least once with the organ, because the organ sounds, of course, a lot different than the piano, which is our typical rehearsal instrument. So they need to be used to the fact that the trumpet is coming on in one section so that doesn't throw them off and encourage them to stop singing, or maybe the organ is not quite as obvious rhythmically as the piano is, and so it's harder for them to stay together. They are more dependent that way on each other than they are on the keyboard instrument. So if we can use as little keyboard as possible, use vocal demonstrations and softer piano playing during rehearsal, and get at least one go around in rehearsal with the organ prior to us singing it in public, that will give them the confidence that they need. I would also encourage you to practice with your singers and having them sing without a conductor, so that they don't, in rehearsal at least, get any kind of visual cue from you. And that will expose some of the places in the music that might become a problem during the worship service or the performance, and you can take care of those in rehearsal. But if they are rehearsing with less than they're going to get during the performance, then when the head bob or the hand gesture is added during your dress rehearsal and performance, that will give them even more confidence. Sort of resist the temptation to encourage them visually from time to time, so that they get used to relying upon each other a lot more than you. And in that same vein, you could certainly allow the choir to conduct itself from time to time. It should be a person who feels confident that you can rely upon and trust to do that, but it would most likely be somebody who's easily visible to all of the singers without having to adjust themselves, kind of like a conductor would be, but one of the singers from within the group, that might be willing to help keep the choir together. And again, work this out with them ahead of time, so that at a certain place for a cutoff or an entrance, they're going to watch one of the sopranos on the end of the choir this way, or one of the basses on the end of the choir that way. They can certainly get used to relying upon each other and certain leaders within the group where you are not able to do the conducting yourself, to keep them together, and again, to give them that extra confidence that especially volunteer singers might need. When you start the piece, make sure to convey your intention. So the introduction, if there is one, sets the tone for the piece. They know that they're going to have to start singing at a full volume because there is more organ involved in the introduction, or they're going to want to start quietly and prayerfully because the organ accompaniment is quite soft. Try to establish some form of the tempo as well, even if there happens to be a fermata or a slight retard before the singers come in, which you have worked out in advance how to overcome when they enter. Convey at least some of the tempo that you expect along with the mood and the dynamics as you play the introduction, so everyone knows what to expect. And then it should also be, of course, something, again, that you've rehearsed with them at least once, so the sound of it is something that's familiar to them. And don't forget, in the long run, and this goes for us in general as musicians and conductors of amateur or semi-professional choirs especially, that less is more. We may know and appreciate all the various intricacies and details a lot more than your average singer might, especially a volunteer singer, and certainly the average congregation or audience member is not always going to appreciate all those various little details that we sometimes fuss over and spend a lot of time trying to get exactly right. Less can be more. Decide what's absolutely necessary to convey the emotion and the expression and the musicality and the accuracy of the piece of music that you're trying to perform, and then be willing to let go of some of those other small little nuances if they don't create the effect that you want, and in fact complicate what you're trying to do in the long run, because everybody will just appreciate the successful singing of the anthem a lot more than all of those little intricacies for the most part. And once you have all that in place, it's time to just trust the process. Making music is a thing that we all do together, and eventually we'll do hopefully together again very soon in the way that we are all used to and know and enjoy how to do. But once that has happened and we're ready to go and we've prepared all that we can, we need to simply trust each other that it's all going to work out, and that the singers know what to do, and you as the organist conductor know what to do, and everything is going to go according to plan as much as we are able to control it. So I hope that this brief overview of this triple threat presentation about how to make it happen in your parish and choir setting as the conductor and accompanist is helpful for you. Again, I'll look forward to hearing any comments or questions you might have, and of course we'll all look forward again to seeing each other in person very soon.